If you want to hear me talk about James Gunn's DCEU, like big picture, 1,000 feet up, what do I think of all of the movies and shows, and which ones am I most excited for, which ones am I least excited for, I've done that. That is on my YouTube channel, Nando V Movies. I did a live stream the day all of this dropped, where I talked about it for like an hour. I was on the Cult Pop podcast this week. I was also on my own podcast where we talked about it a lot. But I want to talk about something specific because we just heard the announcement of the beginning of this universe, the DC universe. And it is an interesting group of movies and shows to start with. Some feel like just things James Gunn already likes or people he likes to work with. You know, Creature Commandos is right up his alley. Suicide Squad, again, but with monsters. Waller is Peacemaker 2. Like, those make sense. But in this video, I want to answer two questions. First one, why is my nose all red? I don't know. It just is today. And I'm recording the video because I decided I was going to. So just, ignore it. Second question. We know a lot of the main characters that are going to be in these movies and shows. Either it's named after them, like Superman, or based on the way it's been described, we can get a tell like which Green Lanterns are going to be in the show Lanterns. But when I looked at the slate for the first time, one of the first thoughts I had was, I bet there's a couple other characters hiding in here. And I'm not talking about the movies that have not been announced. I've heard rumors that there is one movie that has not been announced yet. I have no idea what that is. I'm not going to guess. Probably Justice League. Not really. No, I don't think it will be Justice League, honestly. I don't think they could do Justice Society. Maybe they'd call it Justice League International. I just think they'd want to distance themselves somewhat from Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon's Justice League. It's not that they're both bad, but just like this is a new thing. And maybe if Flash performs really well, we'll get a Flash sequel immediately, or a Blue Beetle sequel, or whatever. But I want to ask this question. Like, Iron Man 2 is an Iron Man movie that also happens to star Black Widow. It was a soft introduction of Black Widow. Thor, a Thor movie with a very soft introduction to Hawkeye. I'm wondering, what other characters might be hiding in the releases we already know about? Then I'm gonna look at all 10 releases and pick out one character from each that has not been announced, is not inherently a part of that group, but might be related to it in a way that would make sense, just to speculate. So we'll see in a couple of years if I was right about this or not. This is all based on comics, no information I have or anything like that. Just kind of like, who does this character usually hang out with? This might be where he comes in. And a lot of this is like, we got some announcements, but we got a bunch of other things that were not announced. And maybe it's because they're actually going to be the co-lead in this, right? So let's start. This is a confusing one, but in the beginning, Creature Commandos. I know next to nothing about the Creature Commandos. I know they're Suicide Squad, but with Frankensteins or something. I think Amanda Waller is in charge of it, and I'm pretty sure Weasel's on this team. I'm not going to speculate on who the bad guy will be. I'm not going to speculate on what I think like other Creature Commando members are going to be there, but I do think if you wanted to introduce a character that we haven't seen yet in the DCU, or DCEU for that matter, I think you could use the Waller connection to bring in Nathaniel Adams, aka Captain Atom. I figured they'd want to put him in one of these for a while, just because like he's another Superman type figure who's got a lot of power, he's got a pretty solid name recognition within the DC community, and he's never been in one of these. So maybe at the end of the show or something, Amanda Waller will get her own Superman. Or maybe they'll just like, he'll be a guy who works for her who has no superpowers, but we'll get them in the future. Again, this is totally speculative, and Creature Commandos is a bad place to start, but it is technically the first one, so there you go. Waller, I have a little bit of a better guess at. So Waller is going to be a story about Amanda Waller, I guess, or the people around Amanda Waller. I'm hoping it's the second one. Only because Amanda Waller, for me, is kind of a Han Solo or a Boba Fett character, where like, the less you know about her, the more interesting and scary she is. Now, I'm sure James Gunn and Viola Davis could work together and make a show about Amanda Waller that makes her a compelling character and gives her a lot of nuance, but also that's just not, I guess, how I usually visualize that character, especially not how she already exists in the DCEU. So, let's say it is a show about some, Cadmus or Checkmates or whatever they are, employees of her secret government organization. This would be a great place to introduce Mr. Terrific. Have him work there. James Gunn has already tweeted out, or I guess mastodoned out, a picture of Mr. Terrific out of context. So like, he's probably going to be in one of these things. So looking at all the projects, I think this is the place where he makes the most sense. Next, okay, Superman Legacy. You've already heard my Man of Tomorrow pitch. If you haven't, it's on my Nando V Movies YouTube channel. Even though I've already said it in that video, I'm going to say it again here. I think this is where we, for the first time, meet Steel. Another character like Mr. Terrific, like Captain Atom. huge name recognition in the DC Comics world, a character many of us know from animation, and a character who just has never been in these. I mean, he was technically in that one movie, but again, an ally to Superman, a human ally. I do think maybe my pitch wasn't 100% what James Gunn is going for, but it does seem like the vibe of it, as he has described it, is this like, you know, new world with a bunch of bad jerks in it versus this wholesome Superman. And I do think him inspiring a regular guy makes so much sense to me. So I'm going to say Steel is the one that shows up in Superman Legacy. Next up is Lanterns. So obviously we're going to get a bunch of Lanterns. We know Hal is going to be in there and John is going to be in there. I hope Guy makes a cameo or something, because I love me some Guy Gardner. I love me a character who's just a real piece of work, who it's fun when another character just decks him, right? Like, that's great. I also, like, I'm a fan enough of Kyle Rayner that I wouldn't be, you know, upset with seeing him or Jessica or Alan Scott or some of the other Earthbound Green Lanterns, but who else could show up in this? Obviously, we could also do other, you know, Kilowog, Mogo, the Planet Green Lantern would also be fun. But we know Lanterns is a procedural based on Earth. So I imagine we're not going to meet too many aliens, or at least not aliens we mostly know from space. One of the other things we know about the DCU is that James Gunn, I believe, said he was inspired by the DC animated universe. That was one of his like guiding stars for this. Maybe that's something I made up in my head because it would be cool, but I'm pretty sure he said that. If that is true, I would not be surprised if this is where we get introduced to one of Jon Stewart's love interests in the DCAU, which would either be Vixen, although she's not my pick for this one, or what I think is the more likely, Hawkgirl, Shiera. They had a romance in the comic, her and John. She is also an alien who spends a lot of her time on Earth. We already know Hawkman. They don't have to be related, but like we as an audience are familiar with that kind of guy. And we don't know anything about Hawkman. We never figured out what his deal was in that Black Adam movie. Was he from space? Was he an explorer? Was he reincarnated a bunch of times? Nobody knows. It seems like he's from space since he had the Nth metal ship, but I could see Lanterns being used as a way to introduce her. Maybe she already has a relationship with John, or she's like someone he flirts with and it's like, oh, that's something's gonna start there. But like, just look at the 4 characters that we've looked at so far. Hawkgirl, Steel, Captain Atom, Mr. Terrific. Those guys would look great on a Justice League. They could even be their own Justice League. Like, not the, you know, B-listers, but like those guys would look great on a Justice League. And I'm not saying that I think all of these stories should just exist to set up more stories. What I'm saying is these characters interact, they know each other. A lot of them got their start in another character's book and then they spun off into their own book. This is how comics works. You know, like Black Panther or the Inhumans, they didn't just start making those books. They made Fantastic Four books and then threw Black Panther into one or threw the Inhumans into one. And then people, you know, connected to that and went, you know what, let's make those their own things. And then they became this dynasty. So the idea of a crossover between characters that may not seem super related, or it's like, well, you know, she's not part of his origin, so why would she be there now? That's just how comics works. It's loose. These connections are what makes it fun. The Authority. All right, listen. I have not read this book yet. I've read a couple of issues, and I think I have an idea of what the main Authority cast is, although I understand that it changes a little bit. Something kind of like the Justice Lords from the DCAU. Honestly, it seems like that's kind of like that. I mean, it's been done plenty of times, right? Superman does it in Injustice 2, Hyperion, you have the Boys do it to some extent, although they're much worse. But like this idea that a generally well-meaning superhero decides to take matters into his own hands and goes too authoritarian and then becomes a bad guy. That's what I know about the Authority, and it makes sense. I mean, authority, you know, authoritarian. It's like, it's right there. I don't know anything about the Wildstorm universe. This is the first comic from that universe that I've read. It's not the first time I've seen any of these characters. I've read Midnighter and Apollo, really enjoyed them. There's another character from the Wildstorm universe that is not part of the Authority. It is not guaranteed to be in an Authority movie. Grifter. I really don't know what Grifter's deal is. I've seen Grifter comics like on the shelves, like they're making new Grifter comics. So I don't know, is he like their Rorschach or something, or like a Red Hood type figure who is like, because he looks like he's like a badass, right? Like he's the kind of guy who, man, I'm gonna look real stupid when it turns out he is not this. Like he is a very a very straight-laced by the book Superman type figure. He seems like an anti-hero. And the name Grifter, the hair, the mask, I want to say he has guns. I bet he'll be in this, but he won't be in the Authority, but he will be a guy they know. And then he'll get introduced to the larger DC universe after the Authority collapses. This is my worst pick. Again, like I said, I don't know who this guy is. Like, I was trying to think of characters that it's like, I've read Superman and the Authority, the new Grant Morrison comic about Superman trying to create a super team of heroes that can take his place, but all of them are either in this or would have already been introduced. You got like Manchester Black, you have Natasha Irons, so Steel's niece, you have Midnighter and Apollo, and then I think an OMAC, and then I think a Light Ray. So like, I don't think either of those really matter. Those last two, and everybody else I think is already pretty much guaranteed to be in it, or like I don't think it would be that interesting if I picked Natasha Irons here after John Henry. So I'm gonna say Grifter. I like the name. Maybe I'll love Grifter. I don't know. All right, I just looked up Grifter. Looks like he's a telepath. That's interesting. Would not have guessed. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I bet he's cool. I bet he is cool. People seem to like him. I just have never read it. I never touched the Wildstorm universe outside of just starting reading right now The Authority. But let's move from something I don't know anything about, something I think I'm pretty well informed on, Paradise Lost, the Amazon show. So we know that it is not going to have Diana of Themyscira. It's not going to have Wonder Woman. That means it probably also won't have Wonder Girl or any of those. I don't know if this counts, because I think it's pretty much guaranteed that we get Hippolyta, Artemis, all of the other Paradise Island Amazons. However, I think the actual POV, like the main character of this show, might be Nubia. Only because I think that's an angle that's kind of interesting. I think it's got to be Nubia or Artemis as the main character, just because those are two characters that have taken over for Wonder Woman. They've been kind of replacement Wonder Women in the comics for some time. And I just think since you can't have Wonder Woman be the protagonist, I don't think Hippolyta will be the protagonist. I feel like it'll probably be her. I feel like it'll be Nubia. And she can have a long lifespan, so if this takes place in the past, she can age, very slowly and then show up in the DCU in the present day in a future thing. Also, Nubia just got her own book in the comics, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, especially with James Gunn being so into comic books, which I love. Kind of seems like if there's a series that's very popular or a character that's very popular, they're going to be on James Gunn's radar. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Nubia comes out of Paradise Lost. Next up, The Brave and the Bold. I really don't know what to expect from this one. This League of Shadows, Talia, Bruce, and Damian, like those three are guaranteed. They say more Bat family members are going to be in it. Like I do think there's a good chance that we'll see Dick. Tim probably should already be Robin as this story starts. I also think Barbara will probably show up, and I feel like Jason will be dead. I don't think we'll get Spoiler or Cassandra, just because I don't see the need to introduce them. Like I like them, but I think it'll take some time. Also, Cassandra and Damian are too similar, and that's why I like Cassandra more. Maybe it's just because of a certain comic I read recently, but if they bring Damian into the DCEU, we're dealing with magic, mysticism. This is the Gods and Monsters chapter after all. I think that, again, I think this is highly weighted by a certain comic I read not too long ago. I wouldn't be surprised if this is where Etrigan makes his first appearance. I kind of hoped it would be in Constantine, but since I think the John Constantine movie starring Keanu is its own thing, or is this where Zatanna shows up? I don't know, honestly, which makes more sense. How about this? Let's split the difference. I think either Etrigan or Zatanna will show up in this, and either Etrigan or Zatanna will show up in Swamp Thing. I think both of those characters have enough connections to both of those characters. Like, Batman knows Etrigan, Batman knows Zatanna. She taught him magic. I think the two are closer, and like, he learned magic from her father, Zatara. But I still think those two would make sense in a movie together. It would also be an interesting way to like set up a love interest or maybe like a fling for Batman that's not Catwoman, because we just saw that in The Batman. And you know what? Yeah, let's do Zatanna here, and then Etrigan in Swamp Thing. Because Etrigan is more of a horror movie character. I mean, the movie can be about Jason Blood. he can be the main character investigating Swamp Thing. Kind of the same way that Constantine would, except Constantine's probably not going to be in both universes immediately. We had 2 more, Booster Gold and Supergirl. Both, I think, are pretty easy. And I'm not talking about Booster Gold and his friend over here, you can see over my shoulder, Ted Kord. I think if anything, he'll show up in the Blue Beetle show. And I was thinking about this a little bit. I'm like, who would be an interesting character for Booster Gold to meet? Because he's a character that's been connected to lots of different characters through the JLI and other books he's been in. Maybe this is just because of the show, but I think it would be fun to pair him with Elongated Man here. Not like pair him, but just they would meet. Because Elongated Man is just like a more grounded, kind of smart version of Plastic Man, who I think Plastic Man will get a show in Phase 2 or a movie in Phase 2. He is a very popular character, and he could very well show up here. The problem is, I don't think his energy and Booster's energy work together as well as someone like Elongated Man in a story where Booster isn't taking things seriously and Elongated Man has a lesson to teach him. With Plastic Man, I feel like Booster kind of knows most of what I mean, there's more to Plastic Man than just kind of being goofy and having fun. Just for me, as someone who likes buddy cop stories, and not that I think this would be one, but I do think you want to pair a character with another character who they are just not very much like. And I think Elongated Man grounds Booster, Michael, and I think Plastic Man would just be kind of more, which could be fun. I think they would be interesting characters to interact, but yeah, I just don't think it's going to be in this. I think Elongated Man is the right one. Obviously, Elongated Man is also the character from the Justice League Unlimited show that everybody like me watched when we were kids and went, oh, Booster Gold is cool, and then we read comics and stuff. But like, that was a lot of people, I think's first introduction to Booster Gold, and it's probably one of the best episodes of the show. It's one of the funniest. It's an interesting perspective on that character. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. So this book is a book, like even more than the Batman one, because the Batman is a run, right? Like it's multiple issues that span a lot of time. You can't really just make that into one movie. You got to pick and choose things you're going to keep and not keep. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, 8-issue miniseries. Very possible to just pretty much take that right off the page and put it into the book. However, one way or the other, I think this is where we first meet Brainiac, who is the big bad of this phase, or maybe the first 2 phases. Brainiac is a character that has been kind of, not retroactively, because he's always been connected to Supergirl by just being a Superman villain and like being part of that world, but also the Injustice games kind of set him up as her arch nemesis, where he was the one who destroyed her planet, what's the movie, Argo City, and he was some sort of AI developed. I don't remember if this is how they did it, or maybe he just showed up and like killed everybody. Either way, I do think they are going to have to introduce some sort of big evil villain that is going to be a threat that everybody has to team up to fight. It can't be Darkseid again. We just did that. I don't think it will be Lex, although I think that would be cool. I love Lex Luthor. It could be the Authority. This movie could be Justice League versus the Authority, coming down the pipe. But I don't know. Supergirl's just connected to Brainiac through the Legion of Superheroes, obviously a different Brainiac, but kind of the same thing. And this only has to be a flashback. It doesn't have to be part of this story, but one of the issues of Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, Supergirl tells the little kid her origin and just, is basically like, listen, we might die, might as well know it. And it could be kind of changed so that Brainiac is actually the guy that got everybody she knows killed, instead of what it actually ends up being, which is great. And I don't think it should be changed necessarily, but if she's going to meet someone along the way, I think they make sense. The other character that it could be is, this is where Lobo could show up. The whole book is about Supergirl chasing this guy that killed some people, and it's complicated. It's True Grit in space, but eventually the guy teams up with a bunch of intergalactic, like, pirate bandit types. He could be part of that. He could be someone she meets who tells her where these bandits go. I feel like we will get Lobo. I don't know what is going on with Aquaman and Lobo and Jason Momoa potentially being both of them or neither, or, just Aquaman. It seemed like he was going to switch, but now it seems like he might not. I don't know. But if we get a Lobo, this is probably the place to put him, because the Supergirl story, more than Superman, at least as it's written so far, at least as I'm guessing it's gonna go, should be more of a big galactic tale spanning everywhere. And that's where you would bump into Lobo. You wouldn't bump into him on the street if you're just dealing with Metropolis stuff. Like, you could, but it's just not where would see him showing up. So yeah, those are the characters that I think we will meet in the first chapter of the DCU Gods and Monsters. Thank you so much for staying with me on this one. We learned a lot over the course of the thing. Listen, I'm not, with some of the pitches that I do and, like, you know, castings and stuff, I'm like, they should really do this. I 100% trust whatever James Gunn does in terms of production. Even if he writes all the, he won't, but if he wrote any of these projects, I'd be like, it'll be good. It'll be interesting. He's consistently the best part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, besides like Kevin Feige and certain actors. But like, he has made 2 really good movies, 1 really good holiday special, and 1 really good movie in the DCU. So I just feel like taking any of these projects and putting them in his hands is going to lead to good things. So if these characters don't show up in these movies or shows, it's probably just because he had a better idea, and that makes complete sense. But I do think if I had to pick a couple of characters that are likely to show up in things in the future, these are the ones I'd pick.